We'll open the pre-meeting for the July 16th, 2020 Planning Commission. And with us right now, we've got Travis Ney, Marion Patterson, Sue Wilson, Ned Hacker, Lisa Mokevich, Jared Hall, Zach Smallwood, and Melinda Greenwood. And Bryant Farnsworth will be joining us, I'm sure, for the regular meeting. So with that, we'll look at our agenda. Approval of minutes, the June 18th minutes. Everybody see,
they look good to me.
Okay, I don't have any comments regarding them.
Nor I.
Okay.
I don't have comments on the minutes.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk about the 7-Eleven project for a second, but that's a minute.
Sure.
I talked to Jared about it. He asked that I mentioned to Phil, and I apologize, I haven't got that done. So, but we'll see if we have time.
Okay. And conflict of interest tonight? Anyone have any issues?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
I'm conflicted, but I don't have a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I hear you, Sue. Yep, I understand. And then findings of fact, we had a couple findings of fact, and they looked good to me.
And I've got those written up if you want me to do them.
Great, that would be great. So yeah, it looks like we've got 3. So they were all very routine, so I didn't see anything to be concerned with at all there. All right, who is going to handle our first agenda item, the subdivision project, Sunset Link subdivision?
I'll be doing them both tonight, Phil.
Oh, okay. Then why do we have Zach here?
Zach is
he rescuing you?
And Zach is here for his eminent humanity and his moral support and just helping monitor the comments that might come in during the discussions.
Okay.
So,
he's Susan tonight. Okay.
and because I'm prone to screwing up the technology, Zach can fix that.
It could happen. Yeah, it could happen. Okay. Sunset Links subdivision amended. It's just a subdivision review, a lot split essentially.
It is basically a lot split, yes. So it's that piece of land that's got an existing home. They can easily keep the existing home, meet the setbacks and area requirements, and carve off a new one. The new lot, as you saw in the plans, it's on 7th West. It's pretty busy, and it's right there where the sound wall for 215 is. So it's not really ideal necessarily, but it's big enough and will work for a home. So they'd like to carve that off, and we feel like it works.
Okay. Any comment, any public comment prior on it or anything?
No, not a peep. No calls, no emails, no nothing. The one thing that's interesting about it, and we put it in the conditions, is that there's an old water line on the other side of Winchester, and then there's an even further newer water line on Winchester on the other side of 7th West. They'll have to go from the furthest water line because the closer one's getting removed. So that'll be a significant cost, and we feel like we want it in the conditions so that it's clear for anybody that's buying this property or dealing with this property that it's going to cost something to get the utilities to it. That's
concrete road there, right?
Yeah. And they want to put back to what it was.
It's concrete. So yeah, that is very expensive to do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Jared, can you explain that triangular piece of property along the front of the parcel? So that would, I guess, belong to Murray City as
it's just
Murray
right
City
away.
Street.
Yep.
And I see that the property lines are drawn behind that.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and that existing retaining wall that's in the right of way. Are those issues for the property?
No.
Because the access is going to have to be off 700.
Right.
Which would then go through that park strip, or I don't know if it's called a park strip, but the right of way that wouldn't belong to the property.
Right. So it's basically a large, and I don't have the drawing up, but you've all probably seen it in the packet, and I've got a slide that shows that pretty well too. But yeah, Ned, it's this good question. There's a big section of shoulder that's part of the right of way that's undeveloped, and that'll stay kind of undeveloped shoulder. And then you get to the park strip and the sidewalk, the park strip and the curb and gutter and the sidewalk. So it'll have kind of it'll look almost like no man's land out there a little bit till you get to the roadway improvements. But we talked about that with the engineer. That's not going to get dedicated over to the subdivision. It's going to stay in 700 West right away in case we need it for something in the future. So, and that right away does contain that retaining wall. You're right. That's actually on city property, the retaining wall.
Would the property owner have an opportunity to take care of that property if they wanted to? I mean, at likelihood, it's going to be their front yard.
That they could, if they wanted to grass that and have it out there. I don't think we'd have an issue with that. We won't require them to, but they can. We do that for park strips anyway. Park strips are all in public right away, and we make them mow those and water those.
Correct.
We talked about that. It'll basically be a driveway going across 7 or 8 feet of unused shoulder.
So why wouldn't the city put that property into the subdivision, since it's not going to be roadway?
Yeah, Public Works just declined to make any change there. They could change their mind as we go forward and give it over, but right now they're not willing to give it up. They may want it for, I don't know what they would want it for. It goes to the bridge. And so, who knows?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on to the main event for tonight. Item number 5, Trip Lane subdivision, preliminary subdivision review.
Okay. So we did get some additional comments. I know you had comments in your packet. Just to get the first order of business out of the way, we did attach a bunch of comments to your packets, emails. Yeah. Do you want to do like we did with the vertical bridge and say, acknowledge those comments, but not read them all in?
And you know what, Jared, I went through my packet and I wrote down everybody's name. I can read those just to take a little bit of the load off of you. And then anything that came in since our packet was delivered, you can mention those and read those into the record. Okay.
That'd be great. If you don't mind doing that way, then we'll have Zach read in the other comments that have come since then.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, just because that, I didn't count them up, but there's close to 20 there. So
23.
I did have a couple of duplicates, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
That has to be caught. 2 of them are duplicated.
Yeah. And Melinda has a question.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that's perfect, Phil, if you just go through and acknowledge the names of who sent the comments in. That's my preference, rather than reading them all into the record. They were in the public packet. You guys have all had access to them.
Oh, yeah.
The public has as well. So,
Evans, it would take 45 minutes to read those comments that we've all had for a week. So let's, I like to think that we're responsible enough to be up to date on those.
Can I add my own little anecdote here?
Absolutely.
I had my Midvale Planning Commission last Wednesday, and I had one item that lasted 2 hours because of public comment. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with public comment. I think that's great and we should have it. But reading every single email into the record was a chore.
Jared, how many more comments did we get today?
Sorry?
Bill, I have a question too,
Okay,
when you get a sec.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Melinda.
Well, how many more comments did we get today, or since the packet went out?
Today we got 2, but since the packet went out, I think we've got a total of maybe 5. Zach, can you count those up?
Okay.
4 since the packet went out.
That won't be bad.
And
Okay.
there might be more tonight though too, coming in as we go, and I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, just when we're in chambers, we ask people not to duplicate their comments and so forth. But are we going to be reading the duplicate comments into the record anyway?
I don't know how we can avoid that.
Yeah.
Travis, don't shake your head like that at me. I can see you.
I'm here.
No eye rolling.
This has been my call.
It's not eye rolling.
I think we should read them word for word. I know we asked them to limit them to 3 minutes, but if we edit them at all, I fear that we could have someone come and say, you left out the most important sentence that I had in there. So, I
understand.
By caution. The city council has taken a different approach and they've summarized some, and I just don't feel comfortable with that. So, so I think, even though they are redundant and even we've had the same individuals submit a few different emails. Yeah,
And
just-
another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the end, I just think that because of the, the
Well, it's delicate.
circumstances of just the, COVID-19, the pandemic, I think we just err on the side of caution. So.
I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely. So, all right,
Can I
Jared.
ask a question?
Yep.
What is the length of the road and the proposed cul-de-sac? So trip lane going from 500 or from 800 west to the end of the cul-de-sac. What is that total length?
Zach and I figured it the other day. I'd have to look at my email. It's just under 800 feet.
Just under 800.
And not from, and I'm sorry, I was measuring for the terminus. So it's just under 800 feet from where 800 west comes off of trip lane to the end of
Okay.
where it would connect to Willow Grove. I'm always looking for the 1,000 feet. It's under that if we cul-de-sac it. So it's still legal to cul-de-sac it under our code, if that's the option we have to go with.
Okay.
And then what if it went from Willow Grove to the north?
It would be.
Do you know how many
considerably less
feet that
than
is?
Probably 600.
Okay.
600 feet. Somewhere there's an email. In my emails, there's an email where Zach measured it for me. I'll find that while we're talking.
Okay.
Let
And
you
do we know how many houses would be allowed? I know that's not a likelihood, but if it went from Willow Grove, how many houses would it allow?
We have seen a cul-de-sac version of this plan that had 10 lots as well. I don't think a cul-de-sac.
Was that from Trip?
No, it went from Trip to and then cul-de-sac to Willow Grove, but it would be the same difference. If you cul-de-sac it from Willow Grove to Trip, it would still be 10 lots.
So there's already a 10-lot cul-de-sac right here next to it.
Yeah.
The Cherry Creek Circle is 10
Is that
home
10 exactly?
cul-de-sac.
Yeah. That's
And it was
unexpected area too.
642 feet, just so you know.
How much, Zach?
642.
600. That's what I thought I read.
642 if they do it off Willow Grove?
No. That's we didn't measure that. We only measured the proposal.
It would be
Okay.
less than that than from Willow Grove.
Yeah.
642 feet though.
Thank you, Zach.
All right, Jared. Well, anything else that you want to highlight?
Those
like
are kind
to
of
ask
the
a
business
question.
ends of that I wanted to get out of the way. So
Can I ask you a question, Jared? If the applicant, have they talked to the church? I think you could put a straight road through that. What direction is that? The eastern side of the church parking lot. You'd lose 40 parking stalls, but you could then park on the street if you needed additional.
I don't know that they've talked to the church. Honestly, Ned, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's. Yeah, I would think
They
that's
use
much
that
likely.
parking lot too much.
I know they use it, but I'm just saying there's space there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parking, and you wouldn't lose all of it. You would lose some of it, and you would gain some of it back by parking on the street. So,
It would make double frontage lots out of the west side of Willow Grove, though, to run it out that way, would it not?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think they've talked to the church, but
Well, if you want to bring that up, Ned, in the meeting,
Sure.
you can ask the applicant
Sure.
that.
they may have. I do know that years ago, they've actually been talking about this for a couple of years. A while ago, probably actually years ago, they did talk to the school district about purchasing land to the east there, because on this subdivision plat that we're going to be looking at, in fact, I'm not going to share screens because we're going to run out of time, but on the subdivision plat and the property, when you look at it, there's that kind of, it's not really a road, but it's a service kind of road that runs around the backside of the ball field. That's not on the subdivision property. That's school district property. They looked at trying to buy that and putting the road up that way, and maybe even, I don't know, it didn't go anywhere. So they did talk to the school district, but not to the church. That's kind of my point. So, but they weren't able to buy anything. So.
Okay. All right. Any other pertinent points you need to bring up, Jared, before the meeting?
I just think that maybe in terms of background, to make sure we understand where this goes or how this would go, and then I'll let you guys just ask the questions you want to ask, and we can share a screen and talk about whatever we need to. But the recommendation that we've made is that the subdivision as it's proposed does work and does meet our regs. And if this were, if there weren't that accidental protection strip there in the way, we wouldn't have considered even talking to them about some sort of cul-de-sac option. We would have just recommended that it go through. So when they came forward with this proposal and we saw that there were some challenges and thought we might want to back off and have them just do a cul-de-sac, that's why, because we're not sure what we're going to get from the council about trying to use eminent domain to take that property and make the road go through. So that's why the recommendation is what it is. We do feel like this meets the code, so we're recommending approval, but that approval, it's important to understand, requires that they go get the council to use eminent domain to get that property for them so that the road could go through. That needs to be well understood.
And then if that didn't happen, this would come back to us for preliminary subdivision approval involving a cul-de-sac?
That's what I would recommend, yes.
I thought one of our, in their conditions, it says through street or cul-de-sac.
That's what Trey's engineering condition says, through street or cul-de-sac.
So
I feel like as a staff, if they can't come back with the through street, if it goes forward, we probably bring it back for the sake of the neighborhood knowing what's going on. We bring it back to your preliminary with a cul-de-sac instead, and you review it that way. It's different enough that it should come back to the preliminary if it's not going to get approved at the council.
Oh,
It can't come
okay.
back as a
I was
just what it is.
hoping we could put it to bed tonight, but okay.
Well, I think for the sake of everybody in that neighborhood knowing what's going on and not being nervous, it would be better if it came back before them. And since finals don't get noticed to neighborhoods like this, we probably owe it to them to bring it back as a cul-de-sac and show it one more time. So,
All right. Any other questions for Jared, concerning this?
Only how did that small piece of property ever not get observed and included in the street right of way?
hey, Zach, will you allow me to share a screen?
I think that was one of Phil's buddies that did that way back when, right?
It was a former employee of mine that discovered it and purchased it.
Oh,
Okay.
yep.
Are you guys seeing,
Yes.
is this the planning commission? Are you seeing the slideshow? Or what are you seeing?
Yeah.
No, this is a plat.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you're seeing. So you're seeing the plat. This, that strip there, Ned, that you're talking about, when they subdivided Murray Oaks in this phase, there was a survey mistake. This is what I understand from engineering. There was some sort of survey mistake, and we didn't know, and no one really knew, and it came up for a tax sale. It's a big long strip. It's a survey gap mistake. Came up for a tax sale because no one was paying taxes on it, and Mr. Larson, I think was his name.
Yep, Ron Larson.
Yeah, noticed it and saw that it would keep a road from going through, and he didn't want a road going through, so he bought it. And it's not a real protection strip, it's an accidental one, but it nonetheless exists and is in the way of a road going through. So he kept it for years and wouldn't let anything be considered to go through. He did allow pedestrians to walk through. There's still people can walk through it. And this is a good moment to explain this. This area, we have enough right of way that if we wind up with a cul-de-sac, we're just going to ask them to design a cul-de-sac that comes as close to the end of Willow Grove as it can, so that we can get utilities through and get pedestrians through and everything but a car through. And that's what we'll have to do if it comes to that. So we'll get plenty of access. It just won't be vehicular at that point. So that's where it is.
So the walkway as it is will remain open, or can he be spiteful with that and say, nope, I'm closing it off?
He could be spiteful if he wanted. We've got 30 more feet that we could provide a walkway of our own.
There's 30 feet of right of way there. So
yeah, we really don't need his walkway.
Don't need any permission from him.
So once that road is dedicated, once this road gets dedicated to us as a city, we'll put whoever and whatever we want through that 30 feet that we control, because it'll connect directly to Single Oaks.
Is there enough room?
Through, but if it's a cul-de-sac and touches it, we'll come through it.
You could put a swig there, Jared.
Don't tempt me, Phil. I might,
Yeah.
Well, you could put emergency access there as well.
We could.
Well, is there,
Fire trucks.
quick question, is there enough room to slide the road to the west and we don't need their protection strip? Is that lot deep enough?
If you slid it to the west, you're into the they made a couple of comments. I'm not drawing a blank on their names, but you're into this property here.
Oh, okay. Wait, now I see the dotted line. Okay, never mind.
So, yep.
Never mind.
Dogleg's right there, and we can't get into this. So
Right. Sorry about that.
We'd have to really take property to do it that way. We'd have to.
The protection strip is behind a wall, correct? It's
Yes.
on the other side of the wall.
Yep. I have a photo of it
Okay.
in the presentation tonight.
Yeah, the vinyl fence that's there. Yeah.
I went and walked it again just right before the meeting, Jared. It's in that little walkway where the vinyl fence zigzags. Is that correct? Where the vinyl
Yes.
fence
The
zigzags?
walkway goes right through here. You can enter it right there, and there's a fence here, and there's a fence here, and you walk in and walk through the little fences, and you come out onto the school district property right there.
Yeah, I walked it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'll share a different screen. I could share a different screen real quickly and show you. Let me. Let's see. I'm going to share a different screen. Now, are you all seeing the PowerPoint?
The first slide, it just is a title page.
Let me run through this real quick and get you to the photos of, that's the north end, the Trip Lane. So that's the walkway right there. You're seeing you can walk right in through there and then come out on Willow Grove at the end of that 30 feet. There's a little sign right there that says no bikes.
Yeah. Right.
So, but that's what you're seeing right there. Okay. I'm wondering if there's anything else that I need to tell you about for tonight. There's the north end. That's probably pretty clear. This is actually to make it align correctly with Trip Lane. We'll actually have to dedicate some from Murray City Power, Murray City to the dedication from Murray City Power to Murray City for the right of way. There's no problem with that. We've already spoken to Power Department about it. Not an issue. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Any chance that the Murray Power property would ever be sold off for future development?
They've said no, but never say never, right? You know, if it were, we could turn this into a 3 intersection or even take a road from there to develop that property if they would like to someday. So far, they've said no, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I really doubt it. It's their pole yard and a substation, and it's their surplus yard that they don't have any place else to do that type of activity in.
Yep. So there you go.
Okay. Anything else for Jared right now? If not, we'll cut this a little short and give everybody a chance to get some water before our main meeting.
Michelle, can I talk just for a second about last meeting?
Sure.
Travis will have no interest in this because he was done with it at the meeting, and possibly Phil as well. But I just feel like the optics of last meeting really worried me after the meeting. Just the optics of the 7-Eleven. That new information was provided. I know it was new information, but Zach in our pre-meeting said maybe it's something we should table. And then Zach in the meeting asked the lawyer, Brian, and he didn't know any of the information about the FAK insurance. And I just worried that we kind of just went on with it and voted. And then the next topic with the tower, we tabled. And I kind of wish we had tabled the 7-Eleven as well, just for the optics of it. So Holiday didn't feel as if we didn't care. So that we can look into it, have concrete information, and come back.
I personally didn't feel like it was a big enough of an issue to table the issue over, to be very honest with you, Lisa. It was something that was thrown out there. It was unsubstantiated. And I just felt that we had enough information moving forward, and the arguments in favor of the development were strong enough that we should proceed with it.
I also think that so few of those homes are going to sell under FHA loans. They're max loans. They're $400,000. Hell, they're $700,000 and $800,000 for the homes back in those areas. They're just not going to qualify for FHA loans.
So that would have helped. I wish we had said that in the meeting because I didn't realize that. And I was just uncomfortable that the applicant was telling me how many houses it affected and to what extent. I was like, maybe I should know that information, but.
Sure. No, I understand.
Oh, hey, speaking of getting weird information, so all of our letters on back to the Trip Lane, I've heard Trey quoted as saying there's 200, 300, 400 cars. do we have any idea what that traffic count actually would be? I can tell you that I did a lot of softball games there for a lot of years. I saw school getting out through there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there being 400 cars.
So the traffic counts for single family homes are 9.44 per day, and you're adding 10 homes. So that's
100.
100 cars a day, 100 trips a day. Sorry, but the real issue here is not traffic volume, because that traffic volume, like you just said, is already there. It's softball games and it's the schools. That's what's generating the volume. There aren't that many homes on the street. I think there's 10 homes going up Tripp Lane. So all of your traffic is local and local in the sense of people that live on the street and will live on the new street and that are coming to the school for some reason, to that property. There's not a lot of outside traffic.
Travis, yeah,
Say again?
I have a comment about that. So I think Trey was probably counting other school traffic that comes and goes from instead of going, a half a mile all the way around to 700 and then coming to the schools, they'll cut through on Tripp and you'd get, I could see how you could get that kind of a number with school drop off and pick up.
That's a very limited window each day.
Absolutely. And it would be school traffic. Nobody's going to go commuting that direction.
Right. So it's not going to be traffic, and it's not going to be traffic that's really, there's not going to be a ton of traffic generated by these new homes, but the traffic pattern in the area would change significantly.
It's going to be all their neighbors.
Yeah.
So
that was my issue with, one of the comments had a study attached to it from the Journal of the American
From 1980.
Data from 1950 to 1975, published in 1980 originally, and dealing with a situation where industrial and business traffic is being directed through a neighborhood. This is not apples to apples, so I hope I didn't respond to that really in the reporting or anything, because it's not relevant. It's hard for it to be less relevant, really. There are issues here, but they're not related to that study, so I didn't really deal with that.
Hey, Jerry, I don't know, so I'm asking you, isn't it pretty accurate to say that most cities and communities prefer a cul-de-sac over a dead-end street for all the obvious reasons that we discussed, utilities?
I think it depends.
It depends?
That's another interesting point, and I'll bring it up now. So
I really think these are things that the public should hear too, that we should discuss in open meeting.
That's what I want to bring up, but I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be.
No, it depends on the situation. For utilities, cul-de-sacs suck. You want utilities to go through generally. You loop water lines, you loop sewer lines, everything works better. For connectivity of vehicular traffic, you don't want cul-de-sacs. They actually generate more traffic because they generate more trips. You go 1.5 miles out of your way to get to one place. So they might be good for reducing traffic on the cul-de-sac itself, but you're increasing trips and traffic throughout the area that you put all those cul-de-sacs in. That's the dichotomy. It's upside down.
You're also more likely to run over your kid in your driveway in a dead-end cul-de-sac than any other location.
A dead end? I think a dead end would be more dangerous than a cul-de-sac, right? We'll discuss it in public, right?
It just doesn't matter. Cul-de-sac, either way, you're more.
With that, I'm going to close the pre-meeting, and we're going to all get up and walk into the regular meeting room, and I'll meet you over there.
Okay.
He really got up and left.
He's fully committed to this. All right. All right.
Does anybody else need a water? Jared, your screen is still up. Your slide.
Okay. Do you want me to take it down for a bit?
Doesn't matter. It's whatever you'd like. I just didn't know if you knew.
Well, I just unshared it. So is that a word? Unshare? I don't know.
Sure. You selfishly repossessed it.
That's right.
Okay, have we got everybody back? Let's see. Yep, I think so. Okay, so we're just missing Scott. So, all right. Well, I would like to welcome everybody watching us online this evening to the July 16th, 2020 Murray City Planning and Zoning meeting. Prior to beginning the meeting today, I would like to read an opening statement concerning the meeting that we are having this evening. As the chair of the Murray City Planning Commission, I, Phil Markham, have determined that due to the continued rise of COVID-19 case counts, holding an in-person meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those in attendance. Under these circumstances, House Bill 5002, an amendment to the Open and Public Meetings Act, allows for electronic meetings to be held without an anchor location, so long as the public has an opportunity to view the meeting and submit public comments. We're holding tonight's Planning Commission meeting via video conference, and the meeting is being live streamed at www.murraycitylive.com. If you have a public comment to submit to the Planning Commission, please do so via email at planningcommission@murray.utah.gov. So that again is planningcommission@murray.utah.gov. And we will read those comments into the public record when they are received, when we have that pertinent item up for review. So with that, with that, I would like to welcome everybody this evening and do a little bit of housekeeping. With us here this evening, I'm Phil Markham, the chairman. We have Travis Ney, Marion Patterson, Sue Wilson, Ned Hacker, Lisa Mokevich, and that is the Planning Commission that is present this evening. Scott Woodbury is excused this evening. He may join us at some point, but at this point he is excused. Staff this evening is Jared Hall and Zach Smallwood, and we're also joined by Melinda Greenwood from the department as well. So with that, I'd like to cover just a few basic housekeeping rules and how we'll run the meeting this evening. We have some general business that we will attend to first in our agenda. And once those items are taken care of, we'll move to the main agenda items for the evening, and that involves two subdivision projects. When these items are presented, we'll have staff present those to us. Then we will have a chance to ask staff questions. We'll bring the applicant in on the conversation and ask them for additional information if they choose. And then after that, we will allow public comment on that subject. We'll take a brief break and allow public comment to come in. We'll then read that into the record and then bring it back up for further discussion for the commission. And we will either make a decision or postpone or take some sort of action on that item. So with that, I think we'll get started here with our business items. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from June 18th, 2020 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read those minutes?
Yes.
Any comments, corrections, or input?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes from the June 18th meeting as written.
Okay.
I second.
Motion by Lisa, did you second? Thank you.
Yes, I'll second.
I have a motion by Ned Hacker, a second by Lisa Mokevich to approve the Murray City Planning Commission minutes of the June 18th, 2020 meeting. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Next item is conflict of interest. Do any members of the commission have any conflicts of interest with either of the two items on the agenda this evening?
No.
No.
Okay, all right, that's excellent. And finally, approval of finding of fact. We have 3 finding of fact from our previous meeting. We have a finding of fact for waterscape landscaping, rec demolition, and 7-Eleven. Has everybody had a chance to review those? And if there are any comments, please make them. Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the findings of fact for a conditional use permit by Shane Kershaw to allow the operation of a landscape contractor business on the properties located at 5909 South and 5915 South Stratledge Street. Approve a motion to approve a conditional use permit by Tedis Melgar to allow the operation of a demolition contractor within the MG zone on the property located at 4195 South, 500 West, units number 77 and 78. And a motion to approve a conditional use permit by Jake Tate from Anderson Whalen and Associates to allow a gasoline service station and 7-Eleven convenience store to be built within the CD zone on the property located at approximately 5568 South Van Winkle Expressway.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ned. He beat you to it there, Travis. So I have a motion by Sue Wilson, a second by Ned Hacker to approve the findings of fact as presented to us this evening. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, with that, we will move to the meat of the agenda, and that consists of our first item, which is agenda item number 4, a preliminary and final subdivision approval for a single-family residential zone at 6221 South, 700 West. Jared will be presenting this to us.
Thank you. Can everybody see the slide? Opening slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you mentioned, this is an application for preliminary and final subdivision. It's only 2 lots at 6221 South, 700 West. The property is shown right there. You can see, just to orient everyone, this is I-215 and the overpass of 700 West there, and the Sunset Links subdivision. So this officially is the Sunset Links amended subdivision. What they'd like to do, this is in the R18 zone. Reminds me of the open space zone across the street here, that this is 700 West and the golf course here. Let's go to the next slide. What they're proposing is to take the existing home and keep it, identify an 8-foot setback for it, and allow that to be a single standing lot, keeping the existing home, and then create an additional building lot here, proposed 102, for a new home. The setbacks have all been shown here. It can clearly meet those setbacks, and a home could be placed here quite easily. There are a couple of interesting things to note about it. It's very standard. Otherwise, it can meet a 25-foot front and 25-foot rear as required in the R18 zone. But the 700 West right-of-way, it comes right to this line. This is the property line, and you can see the improvements of the right-of-way are quite a distance from it. This property is all in the city right-of-way, but it appears to be part of the subdivision itself, the lots themselves. So there'll be sort of a long space for the property to have to create a driveway, et cetera, and cross this long unused shoulder. I think I pointed out in the staff report that this retaining wall is not on the subject property, but rather in the right-of-way, and I have a picture of that right here to kind of illustrate that. So you're seeing the wall here, the sound wall, and the I-215 freeway. All of this area is actually in the right-of-way and not part of the lot. The question was asked earlier, would we object to, as a city, them landscaping, maintaining some landscaping in this area? And the answer is no, it's not required, but we wouldn't object to that if they want to use that as kind of part of their front yard, because again, it's unused right away. And the improvements, sidewalk and curb and gutter, already exist. You can see that retaining wall better in this shot right here. The existing home, their driveway comes up this side and enters the garage here. This would be the area for the new lot to be created. And the retaining wall, as we said before, is all actually out in the public right of way, looking across 700 West here. There is a utility in the west side of 700 West. The water utility is going to require quite a distance to run because there are 2 existing water lines. It's going to have to connect to the newer water line, which is a little further distant. But we put that in the conditions so that it's clear to the applicant that there's a kind of a significant utility infrastructure cost associated with this development that they need to be aware of. But other than that, the standard kind of requirements are met here by the conditions, just meeting the city engineer's requirements, meet the applicable requirements of fire and building, and that water service we call out here so that it would be very clear to everyone that's involved that needs to happen from that larger water main on the west side of 700 West, and then preparing, of course, the final subdivision plat. Since it's only the 2 lots, we are recommending approval of both the preliminary and final subdivision requests. Do you have any questions for staff at this point?
All right. Seeing that there are none, I'd like to ask if the applicant is present this evening.
I saw Mr. Ames there. Zach, can you unmute him? There we go.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Sir, could you state your name and address for the record, and then take a minute and provide any additional information that you think would be helpful to us?
Sure. It's Chris Ames, and address is 4738 Hidden Woods Lane, Murray, Utah. This house was actually the remnant piece of the original owners of this whole subdivision. They had an original house, scraped that, and built this new house on this larger lot. That's why it's larger than the rest of the lots in the Sunset Link subdivision. Unfortunately, they didn't take care of the property, and the homes become run down, and a lot. It's just been a weed patch for 20 years. So the neighbors are happy we're coming in and doing something. It's caught about 10 moles that have been digging up everybody's properties already and knocked down the weeds. And I think the new house is going to be a welcome addition to what it has been historically over the last 20 years since this house has been built.
Have you had a chance to review the 4 conditions attached to the application this evening, and can you satisfy those?
Yeah, I've talked at length with the engineering department and Trey about how to get across 7th West without shutting down the traffic pattern, because it's the only way across the freeway there for
Right.
a couple blocks in each direction. So I'm aware that it's going to cost a little more to bore utilities and things like that, and I'm aware of the costs involved with that.
Excellent. All right. Well, are there any questions for the applicant from commission members? Okay. All right, sir. Well, thank you for being here. We'll take a minute and go to public comment. And if we have any public comment, we'll read that into the record and give you a chance to respond to that after that period. So with that, I would like to open this agenda item up for public comment. We'll take a couple of minutes to allow folks to write any email communication they would like, and we'll deal with it at that time.
Okay, so far I do have one email that was submitted this past Tuesday on July 14th by Lisa Cuthbertson. It states, this is regarding the property address 6229 South, 700 West. Our property is directly on boundary of this property. We just wanted to address a few things. Your blueprint didn't show lot 2 garage and egress point. The trees need to be addressed and removed. Rodent infestation needs to be addressed immediately. And that was the end of the email.
Okay. Anything else coming in at all, Zach?
Not had anything yet.
Okay. Well, I think it's appropriate at this time to close the public comment portion of this agenda item, and we can bring it back up and ask the applicant to just address those items that were in the email if he chooses to. Not that they are conditions attached to the development of this property, but if he desires to address those. Mr. Ames?
Sure, the rodent problem I was aware of. It's been handled. We hired a pest remediation company that's been out there the last couple of weeks, and it's been trapping the moles. As far as the trees go, the one you see in the front is dead, and that will be taken down. And I'd imagine the one in the back will be in the footprint of the new home, but I'd leave that up to the builder, and whether the new homeowner, I'd want to clean it up and keep it if it were my yard.
Sure.
Long term. And then as far as the garage, I can't imagine why that matters to anybody in the subdivision. And then obviously will be addressed in the building permit process. And it's kind of
and as I said, those are not part of the conditions, so there's no requirement on any of
But
those.
I do want to be a good neighbor and keep the noxious weeds down and the rodents that have called that a home for 20 years. Make sure that's taken taken care of, and we've been proactive about doing that.
Very good. Thank you. Any further questions from the commission for the applicant? Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, with that, I'll bring it back up to the commission for additional consideration, comments, or I am open for a motion as well.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we grant preliminary and final approval for the Sunset Links amended subdivision on the property address 6221 South 700 West, subject to 4 conditions listed.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Sue Wilson and a second by Maren Patterson that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final approval for the Sunset Links amended subdivision on the property address 6221 South 700 West, subject to conditions 1 through 4 as presented to us this evening. Please call for a vote.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Patterson,
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Ney,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
and Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Good luck with your project. That will
Thank you
be
very
an
much.
asset to that area. Thank you very much. All right. Our next agenda item is number 5, and it is a preliminary subdivision approval for NeighborWorks of Salt Lake, a single-family residential development on 2.78 acres at 871 West Tripp Lane, and Jared will be presenting that to us this evening.
Thank you.
Jared, may I interrupt real quickly?
Sure.
I apologize. There was an item that came in just barely. So I'm not sure how we proceed with that.
A comment?
Yes, a comment.
For neighbor or for Tripp Lane or for the previous item?
For the previous item.
Well, I think
It's up to you, Phil. I think we're done.
we have voted on the item. It has been resolved. So I'm sorry. I don't think it's fair at this point to read something that would cause us to. There's no way to reconsider at this point, basically.
Zach, if it's an issue I can help with in any way and making that neighbor happy,
Sure.
contact.
Yeah, I will forward it on to you and
Let me know.
Yeah.
I want to be accommodating and make sure everybody's concerns are
perfect.
accommodated.
Thank you, Mr. Raines. That's generous of you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt, Jared.
Oh, you're fine.
All right, Jared.
Thanks. So I'm going to go through some slides to talk about this project a little bit, and then let you ask questions as we go. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to stop me at any point, okay? So 871 West Tripp Lane, the subject property is a currently vacant 2.78 acre parcel west of the ball field at Riverview Junior High at the end of Tripp Lane. The project runs between Tripp Lane on the north and the dead end of Willow Grove Lane on the south. On your plats that are attached to your documents, that's labeled as Single Oak Drive. That's not correct. It's Willow Grove Lane. But there's always been some confusion about the name of the property, so the name of that road. But at any rate, it is this 2.78 acres. The proposal is for a 10-lot, single-family residential detached subdivision. It's in the R18 zone, as most of the surrounding property is also. The lots are all conforming, as we said in the staff report, to the requirements of the R18 zone. You could easily place homes and meet the setbacks, 25 feet front, 25-foot rear, 8-foot sides, no problem. They're all 8,000 square feet or greater. There's a slight discrepancy in the lot at the very north end. It's just under 8,000, need to be increased in size. That's easy enough to do, adjusting some lot lines throughout. But when the final comes back, they do need to all reflect the 8,000 square feet. This is the layout that, as you can see, this is Tripp Lane at the north. The property here is in the Murray City Power Department's ownership. They would dedicate that to Murray City as Murray City for the roadway to come into the property. That's been discussed and agreed to, not an issue. And then at the south end, it would come out to Willow Grove Lane as it's proposed here. And of course, that's the larger issue as you've been reading your staff reports and the comments. I'm sure that's been kind of the focus. As all the lots are conforming to the standards of the zone and can easily accommodate them. That real issue has been whether or not we can get out to Willow Grove Lane with a through street. from TRIP. And I want to show you just in the next slide here, we can talk about those two issues. As I mentioned, this is property that would have to get dedicated for the right of way. It's all public right of way, by the way. Property that would be dedicated on the north end at TRIP, shown right here. And then property at the south end at Willow Grove Lane, there is this strip right here that is not in the ownership of either the city. It's not a dedicated piece as the rest of Willow Grove is here. And it's not in the ownership of the subject property applicants either. It's in the ownership of the Livingstons, who own the property here at lot 13 in the Willow Oak subdivision. So effectively that blocks access through to connect the road fully to Willow Grove Lane. And that has been an issue of some discussion, and most of the comments that we received that did not agree with the through street mentioned that property would have to be taken with eminent domain or purchased through eminent domain. That is accurate. The city engineer, as I understand it from my conversations with him, approached the Livingstons about purchasing that property for right of way. They were not interested in selling, having concerns about through traffic. So as the project stands before you tonight, this configuration does work and does meet our requirements for subdivision in Murray City. However, it's not possible unless the city council, unless they're able to control this property. And right now it doesn't seem like that would be possible through simple purchase or persuasion, so it would be through the use of eminent domain. The Planning Commission, as the land use authority, does not have powers of eminent domain, so that would rest with the city council. And we can talk about that a little bit in more detail when we talk about the conditions of approval. Just to show you that those areas where the roads connect, this is the north end, the end of Trip Lane currently. Last properties there, and the power department property you can see here. That dedication for right of way would be in this area. Well, actually, sorry, in this area, and then loop the road in through there. You can see the school property and the ball field right there on your left, and that this is actually not part of the subject property. Subject property is all of this. That's the north end. The south end, sorry, Willow Grove Lane is just beyond that fence line. And this fence line here marks the southern perimeter of the property and the west perimeter there. So you're looking at a big portion of the property there. This is a pedestrian walkway that the owners of the property here on Willow Grove Lane on the east side have allowed pedestrians to use to get through to the ball field and to the school. So you're looking basically, that fencing that you see is this right here. It allows a pedestrian walkway through. So when we refer to the pedestrian walkway, that's what we're talking about. Thought it was important that you understand kind of where that is. In your packets, we included a snippet and then a copies of this link node analysis that we had done as staff. Zach actually performed this for us the other day. And there's an aerial photo version of it where you can see all the different homes, but it's harder to see the nodes themselves. We wanted to include this for you and then include it in the slides too, so that it's clear that we're trying to look at this area and why we're supporting and try to explain why we're supporting still as staff a road that connects through. The subject property is right here. The red dots are cul-de-sacs or dead ends where the road doesn't go through. The green dots represent intersections of any kind, whether they're four-way or two-way or three-way, that do allow the motion to continue, vehicular motion to continue. So you can see kind of just even visually here, all those red dots and all these cul-de-sacs. There are a number, I think I counted 23 or 24 just in this area alone, versus, and they get that score of 1.18. Again, these scores go from 1 to 2.5. Score 1.18, and then the difference between that and the average score that you should be shooting for in an area, which is 1.4 or 1.5. We get 1.44 in an eastern section of Murray, where you can see there are lots of cul-de-sacs, but there are significant roads through. This long loop there too as well, big long road here. That's the kind of thing you're looking for, better connectivity. And even in a smaller area, take for example, this little section here with all the through streets that allow for that motion to occur versus this area right here. Similar in size, but completely different in terms of connectivity. And the question got asked earlier, aren't cul-de-sacs preferable? And the short answer is it depends on your point of view. They might be preferable in certain circumstances, and people do enjoy living on a cul-de-sac. There might be less traffic on your cul-de-sac specifically, but when you have limited connectivity in an area like this, you increase trips, vehicle trips and vehicle miles traveled. We try to measure things in VMT now, vehicle miles traveled, instead of just trip generation. You increase that trip generation because no one has good access to different places to make shorter trips or consolidate trips. You wind up running more people out to the larger roads and up and down the roads and then back down the side roads again, instead of allowing better flow of traffic through here. This project that's been proposed at 10 lots is not going to generate a lot of traffic on its own. There's been questions about traffic studies and whether we required that. 10 lots doesn't rise to the level where we normally ask for a traffic study because it doesn't generate on its own enough trips to warrant that, about 100 trips. 10 lots, 9.44 trips per day on average for a single family detached home. When we get to 30 lots or so, we start looking at traffic studies, et cetera. In this case, the real question is not the traffic volume generated by the subdivision itself. It's the change in traffic patterns generated by the subdivision. If the subdivision goes through, it will change the traffic pattern. In staff's opinion, engineering and planning zoning opinion, we feel like it would change the traffic pattern for the better, allowing limited better connectivity, although this area is still going to suffer from very limited connectivity. Something is better than nothing in our view in that area. It won't change the volume of traffic significantly overall in the area. Again, we don't traffic studies, and we tend not to look at the individual lots or 3 or 4 lots or 5 or 6 lots in terms of traffic. We're looking at the area, and that area needs improvement. If we could get a connection through, we recommend for it. However, with that said, there are those challenges to getting that connection. With a cul-de-sac, if it has to go to a cul-de-sac because there's not a way to get the road to go through, we're still recommending that utilities be provided through to Willow Grove to loop those and make them better, and that pedestrian access be provided through to Willow Grove as well. And of course, that's always been possible because of that limited walkway. So we can deal with that if we need to. We'd love to see it go through if we can. An issue of drainage, just to point out too, just in case this was confusing at all in the conditions that the engineers department sent, they're showing retention on a single lot on lot 6. You can see that right here. I'm blown up a little bit here. We don't do retention for a subdivision on an individual lot in an easement. They'll have to figure out another way to do that. Trey's been very clear. It's possible in lots of other different ways, in the roadway or in an area that they carve out of a lot and leave as a parcel for us to control. But we want to have better access to it if it's going to be a city easement or a city controlled parcel. We want to control it, not just as an easement. So that's easily fixed, but it's got to be done differently than it's been shown. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. It's an easy fix. It's not a big issue.
And that is one of the conditions, correct?
Correct. So it's dealt with, just in case that was a concern. With that, we are recommending approval of the preliminary subdivision. Again, this is 10 lots. We want it to go through preliminary and final separately. It should get a preliminary at this point. We are recommending that it get a preliminary at this point with these conditions. One of those conditions being item 1B, that there is private property that would need to be controlled or obtained in order to extend the subdivision's right-of-way that's been proposed. So with that item 1B, it looks like a kind of a minor deal, item 1B, but that's very significant. If that property can't be controlled, then it needs to be redesigned as a cul-de-sac and come back to the Planning Commission. Other than that, the other issues can be dealt with fairly easily. There are just the 9 conditions, and none of them are really out of the ordinary. Any questions for staff at this point? Thank you.
Jared, I have a small question for you.
Sure.
Everything, I appreciate everything you've done and said. It's helpful. I just one question about, in general, it's my understanding in general, most cities don't allow many streets just to be stubbed off and dead end like the existing Willow Grove is. And that's for access reasons for emergency vehicles and whatnot, right? Generally speaking, they're expected to make a cul-de-sac unless they can prove they intend to change the road in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right on. So normally, I'm going to use the larger one to kind of reference this. Normally, actually, I'm going to come all the way back out to the aerial. So you can see as Willow Grove runs in here and dead ends, that is not normal. They obviously, in terms of subdivision, when they were doing Murray Oaks Phase 4, they had intended that would continue on. Otherwise, they would have at the very least, they would have installed what's called a temporary cul-de-sac, a slightly smaller cul-de-sac with the intent of redistributing that property to the adjacent property owners when the road did go through. You can see examples of those in several places. It's not a great example of it, but can you see that down at the end of Susquehanna right here? I wasn't here for this, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that Susquehanna used to be, just like Normandy and Noble and Murray Oaks, a cul-de-sac. And then at one point, it was temporarily a cul-de-sac, and then they took it around the corner. That's what you're seeing right there is a remnant of a temporary cul-de-sac during one of the phases of construction. If it's not, if I'm off and that's not true, it looks visually like that happens. You see that all over the place. Typically in subdivisions that were done in the 80s and 90s, this was very, very common. If you look at the building numbers, the construction numbers for single family homes in Utah in the 80s and 90s, they were significantly higher than they are now. Not quite as high as they were in the 70s, but I don't think they made anybody do temporary cul-de-sacs in the 70s. They just dead-ended everything like they did here. It was kind of the Wild West of subdividing. But normally you would have seen a temporary cul-de-sac here, or they would have approached even an adjacent property owner and said, can we, for the next couple of years until you're ready to build, have a temporary turnaround here of some kind for fire and emergency access? But dead-ending directly, you're exactly right. That's not typically allowed. It would have been some sort of temporary cul-de-sac. In Murray subdivision ordinance, we do allow, if it's a very short stubbed road, we will allow it to be stubbed without that temporary, but it's never intended as a permanent solution, no.
And what is the reasoning for that? When you can't build a cul-de-sac or you intend to extend, you have to build a temporary, that's for fire access, that's for emergency vehicles?
For emergency and emergency and other public services like snow plowing and garbage pickup and things like that.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification just because
Sure.
it looks to me like that was never intended to end that way and for the safety of the community. It was intended to go.
I think you're seeing that correctly. I would assume looking at it from the aerials as well, that it was not intended to remain that way.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Please.
Okay, so this is a de facto protection strip, right? There is an error in the survey. There was a piece of property. Someone came in and purchased this piece of property. They don't enjoy the use of this property unless they just choose to pace back and forth in this walkway, correct? I mean, it's not an easy way for them to really do anything with this property. It's not buildable for them. They couldn't do anything with it.
No, it's not.
Would you allow would the city allow a protection strip to go forward in this day and age?
No, we never allow protection strips in modern subdivisions. And this one was not intended. It was accidental, like you said.
It was a survey error, right? It was an error. But why would you not let these happen? Why do you go out of your way to make sure this doesn't happen?
Because and that's a great question, Commissioner Ney. So protection strips, they originated with folks developing and not wanting adjacent properties to refuse to participate in the installation of improvements, which are very expensive. Putting in roads and curbs and gutters and sidewalks and park strips, and utilities, it's very expensive. So when you run the property up to somebody else's land and leave it, you're basically doing them a favor, allowing them to build on it or put in a cul-de-sac or something. This one, it doesn't really, it's not as dramatic an area for that, but in some cases we have there's a long property along a long road that's getting put in, and somebody owns the south side of 700 feet of road and somebody owns the north side, and the north side property owner's like, I'm never subdividing my land, so I'm not helping you build your road. So then when they put in their right of way, the other developers, they're like, well, we're putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of public improvements, and this guy's just going to turn around and subdivide and not have to do any of that. So we're going to keep 3 feet of it back so that he doesn't actually touch the right of way, so that when he goes to build, we can get some money for it that he should have given us when we were building this road. Because he's going to sell eventually. He's not going to keep this farm forever. That's kind of the thinking. So you can see that there's a little bit of sort of inherent justice in the idea of protection strips, except that they ended up doing the exact opposite. They ended up being extortion strips or blocking further development that was intended or that's needed for fire access. And then if this protection strip had got put in there, if it had been done as a true protection strip, for example, it could have blocked what's needed or what's intended in a master transportation or something forever. And we would never do that intentionally or allow it intentionally anymore. Sometimes it just is kind of the pits to be the developer that's coming in first. And every once in a while, someone's going to piggyback off of your expense. And that's just how it goes. Is that, sorry.
Yes, no, that's a great explanation. I appreciate it. So it's always been in the city's plan that eventually this would connect. That's why we didn't put in a cul-de-sac. that a fair statement on?
You know, I wasn't here, so I don't want to say that that's why we didn't put it in cul-de-sac, except that the plan itself, our transportation plan, calls generally for connectivity, but it does not call out the location of local streets like this. It calls out arterials and collectors and things like that. But local streets they come in with best connectivity possible as subdivisions happen. So when they were doing Murray Oaks 4, they stubbed it up there thinking, yeah, right away it's gonna move on, and this is my guess. Right away it's gonna move on, the road will go through, and they made this mistake and screwed up the survey, and there you go. Otherwise it would have moved on several years ago. But yeah, that's my thinking. But there's no plan that actually shows this section of road being connected that the city has adopted or something like that. It's just general connectivity.
It's not like the general plan, where the general plan
Correct.
gets down to individual lots and zoning. It's not
right.
the same.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Other comments or questions for staff? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll ask if the applicant is present this evening.
Yes, I am.
And sir, could you state your name and address for the record?
Robert Poirier, and I live at 2087 East Falcon Hill Drive in Sandy, Utah.
Okay. And Mr. Fourier, you've had a chance to look at the conditions attached with your application. Are you able to meet those conditions?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have additional information that you would like to share with us tonight?
I had a lot of information, but Jared did such a nice job. He covered most of the things I want to talk about, so I won't waste your time repeating myself. The only two items I think are worth looking at is the students currently walk down the sidewalk in the public right-of-way, but then cross onto private property, the protection strip, in order to get to the school property. And typically that's not something we normally do in design, having private citizens using sidewalks on other private citizens' properties. The other point with that is that the sidewalk ends and the students are dumped into the corner of the field during the wintertime. I mean, the field's covered in snow and there's a couple of buildings there that just, it's opportunity, it seems like, for unsavory characters to hang out potentially, as opposed to if the road went through, the students would follow a well-lit street, with street lights, public sidewalks. There's other houses in sight of them, where now they're kind of crossing 1,000 feet through a field with some empty buildings on them. And so I feel that's less than a safe condition. And then the length of the stub road, the max allowable is 150 feet. So the state fire marshal would be opposed to this. Your local fire marshal is opposed to it, just due to the lack of maneuverability of how they deal with their rigs when they get to the end of the road. But it's not just fire trucks, it's Amazon delivery trucks, mail trucks. They all need to turn around somehow, and they're either using private property or they're backing up down the street, which is really an unsafe condition. So those are really my two key points that were left out. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Questions from the commission members for the applicant?
I have a question for the applicant.
Please, Ned.
So have you contacted the church to see if they would be amenable to selling part of their eastern parking lot? You'd lose, I don't know, counting up maybe 40 parking spaces. And in the end, potentially you'd have still some street parking there. But was that any part of your decision-making or investigation to be able to connect?
It was because there's an existing pipe there that comes right to our property through their property. Unfortunately, the elevation of the pipe is about the high water of the pond. And so it really wouldn't have been usable for us. And so we have alternate designs we can do. I thought it had more impact on the neighbors. And so I opted with this retention pond just to keep the impact solely on the subject property. But there's certainly other alternatives we can do for a detention pond, and it would just require a little bit of piping.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Mr. Fourier, I have a question for you. In our packet, we did have a letter from NeighborWorks expressing what I recall as really not a hard preference for this plan versus incorporating a cul-de-sac. Are you familiar with that comment? Is that correct?
I have, initially I did, they just wanted to do what the city wanted. And so, initially we had talked about a cul-de-sac there and that's what we had submitted as a concept. But with the direction from the city and so much pushback from every department, or just the desire of every department within the city that we heard from, including the school department, school board, we decided to make the road go through, just thinking that we were doing the better thing for the community.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else right now? Lisa? Oh, there you go, Lisa.
Well, I'm not sure. I have tons of thoughts, but maybe we should wait for the questions.
Okay.
I feel like those 5 houses on Willow Grove, it's a beautiful neighborhood, and having a dead end street is very nice. I understand that, but it was always intended to be more, whether it was meant to be a dead end or a through street, it was always intended to be more. Traffic on Trip is a problem. I can understand why they don't want a through street. Dead end coming from Trip is what they're talking about. Dead end coming from Willow Grove Lane should be an option as well, but there's problems with every option. Let's read the public comment and we'll comment on those. How's that?
I agree. I think we'll have quite a spirited discussion after the public comments. So with that, I would like to open this agenda item up for public comment. And prior to taking items that are submitted this evening, I would like to read the names of the individuals who submitted letters to us prior to the meeting tonight. These letters were all included in our commission packet, and we have had ample time to read and digest all of the information that have been in these. And we really appreciate people getting this to us in advance so that we can read the comments and make our own investigation as well. So with that, I am going to read into the record the names of the folks, and then we'll take a few minutes and allow for public comment to be submitted this evening, which we will read into the record. Okay, we received letters from the following people: Maria Garcias from NeighborWorks, Brenda Green, Brenda Hales, Doug Barnett, Elizabeth Larson, Emily Barnett, Jeff Waldron, Jessica Lucero, Jim Livingston, Kathy Milne, Stephanie Topolovic, and Kevin and Stephanie O'Brien, Lindsay Ross, Kevin and Stephanie Poli, Mark Pargrandinetti, Susan Michaels, Tom Jackson, Wendy Livingston, and W. Paul Miller. Those were the ones that I wrote down. I hope that I did not miss any that were in my packet. I don't know if any of the other commission members saw that I missed anything.
Commissioners, did we mention Steve Fidel?
I did not. Okay, I did not write that one down, but I did read everything that was in my packet, so I could have missed it.
I believe he was in the packet as well. Mr. Chair, will these letters be added to the record and made available to the public? These letters sent to the commission?
Yes.
They're part of the minutes, I believe, aren't they, Chair?
They get included directly in the minutes, so they'll go on. If this were to go forward to City Council for some sort of decision about using eminent domain, they would be included in the minutes that they would read. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking for Mr. Fidel's comment to make sure it was in your packet.
Okay. And so with that, we'll take a few minutes and allow some comment to come in. And while we are reading the comments, public comment will still be open and folks will still be able to submit their comments as well. So we'll take a few. Thank you.
Okay, I will begin. So we did receive, prior to the beginning of the meeting, we had approximately 4 emails, 4 correspondence from the public. So I will go ahead and begin those now. First one is from Lucinda Milne. Hi, Jared. This is Lucinda Milne. We live on 5712 South, 800 West, and we are definitely happy the road is going through. That's what was in the plans when we did our subdivision many years ago, and so we are glad it's finally coming through. Sincerely, Lucinda Milne. The next item is from Doug Barnett. Hello, I have reviewed the documents provided to the Planning Commission regarding the Trip Lane subdivision and have several questions for Murray City and NeighborWorks. Questions for the Murray City planning staff. 1, your assessment noted Trip Lane and Willow Grove Lane should be connected due to safety concerns, specifically related to emergency vehicle access. I have lived on Willow Grove Lane since it was built and am not aware of any incidents where road access put a life in danger. Do you have a number of incidents the road has caused or any examples of incidents and their severity? Number 2, based on the Murray City 2017 general plan, Murray High, Hillcrest Junior High, Grant, McMillan, and Parkside Elementary schools all reside on streets rated as a minor collector or higher. Access to these schools is designed to restrict traffic through residential neighborhoods in order to force the use of collector streets. Like those schools, Riverview and Viewmont reside on a collector street, but there is also access to these schools via residential streets. This is why most of the concerns received about this plan are about the traffic. The proposed plan, rather than restricting residential traffic similar to those schools mentioned, instead encourages more school traffic on even more residential streets. This traffic pattern has been discouraged at other schools, so why are you advocating it for Riverview and Viewmont? For your reference, the attached document contains aerial views of every school in the district, their street classification, and access. Question for NeighborWorks. 1, will you please provide additional information explaining why the average lot price would increase from $125,000 to $150,000 if a redesign is required? You noted the cost of the current design was $15,000. Logically, a plan to redesign into a cul-de-sac would appear to be the same cost of $15,000. Dividing that amount by 10 lots is a cost per lot increase of only $1,500. Why the excess of $23,500 per lot? Thank you, Doug Barnett, 5856 South Willow Grove Lane.
Okay.
And I will say in the email he has attached, like he has stated, the different connections to the schools in the city. Next is from Jason Roberts. Hello, Murray City Planning Commission. These comments are for the Trip Lane subdivision. I was able to read through the packet provided to the commission, and below is how I would summarize the information. By a 3-to-1 margin, residents do not like the proposal. They have no concerns with the new homes. The concern is with traffic coming into the neighborhood to arrive at schools. Those citizens that want the road do so in hopes it will alleviate their own traffic problems. That is like saying, quote, I have COVID-19. If I give it to you, I'll feel better, end quote. Unfortunately, it will most likely make things worse for them and for the residents around them because it will encourage even more traffic to drive through the neighborhood to the schools. The city would have to condemn private property to get this private development built. It appears to me this design creates more problems than it solves. I would suggest building a cul-de-sac instead. Thank you, Rob Richardson. All right, this one is from Daniel Schoel and Jill Johnson. I apologize if I said that name incorrectly. Office of the Planning Commission, Murray City, Utah 84123, regarding extension of Willow Grove Lane. Dear Mr. Mayor, my wife and I recently moved from Draper, Utah to escape traffic noise and the constant sound of cars, trucks, and motorcycles that would be similar if Willow Grove Lane was allowed to be extended into the Murray Park area. This proposed road extension would also be of a major concern to the safety of park and ballpark users with the constant overparking and crowding of parked automobiles along both sides of the proposed street and on the existing street and in the existing quiet residential neighborhood. There has been neighborhood talk that the developer doesn't want to pay the additional cost to design a dead-end cul-de-sac type street closure, but in my experience as a land development design engineer, a cul-de-sac would allow one more lot to be developed, which would more than offset the redesign costs. Children need the protection of a dead-end street or a cul-de-sac when their minds are more interested in the game than they are the automobile and the truck traffic that a through street would cause. As I admittedly superficially reviewed the area, a better option might be to tie in Tripp Lane and the proposed development to Bullion Street through the largely undeveloped land to the north. We just don't think Murray City wants to risk extending Willow Grove, a rather narrow subdivision street, for the use of a few more houses when that street will be so close to the existing park and ball field. Let it remain as it is. Sincerely, Daniel Scholl and Jill Johnson, 853 Cherry Oak Circle. And then I have received approximately 5 emails so far while this has been open, so I will just move along.
All right, thank you.
All right, this one is from John Snelders, Community Planning Committee. A through street would allow for better access for fire and EMS services. Dead ends are not a permanent item and should be eliminated. There is a gate in the Livingston's property that many people and children of the community use. If a cul-de-sac were created off of Tripp, I apologize, there was a period there. I'm sorry. It would cut off access through Willow Grove and block an established path of access used by the public. It is in the best interest of the community and public for a through street to be created. A through street would move traffic off of 700 West and share it between Bullion, 700 West, and the new through streets. Thanks, John Snelders, Layton Construction Company. Let's see. Next is from a Parker Hales. As the Livingstons have not done anything for the upkeep of the property in question, I do not believe that this property should be an issue for the progression of this through street. If the property is the only thing that is stopping the through street, it seems pointless as the Livingstons have not seemed to care about this property until it is for their own benefit. Putting through the street would be better for the entire community. Next is from a Stephanie Pole. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. In response to the comment about making it safer for the children to walk due to having a street and light. It, however, will subject the children to more cars as they walk to school, and it is on a narrower street, which is not meant for the 300 cars traveling. Next is from Emily Barnett. I live next to the subject property at 5856 South Willow Grove Lane. There has never been any safety issues in the walkway. No unsavory characters, only damage to the fence from bikes and motorcycles. The builder set this walkway up without owner's knowledge, and the Larsons were kind enough to allow it. The other side is school district property. There has never been any issues with deliveries, snowplows, and emergency services. From the comments you are hearing, Tripp Lane is very busy, with the current drivers not adhering to the stop sign at 800 West. The proposal adds a through street at the same point where 800 West connects to Tripp Lane, the same location where many children are crossing to the elementary school. Is the city able to place crossing guards in this location? We care for our neighbors' children over drivers bringing their children from subdivisions further away. That is why we are concerned about this through street. Please get a traffic study or ask NeighborWorks to create a cul-de-sac. Emily Barnett. Next is from Doug Barnett. It says, hello, I submitted the questions below on Tuesday, but they were not asked or discussed, so I am sending this again. I would like answers to all these questions. Thank you. Also, as the individual living at the end of the street. There have never been any issues with people being able to turn around on the dead end street. This is a non-issue. And then I believe, Jared, how should I do this one? It includes his same email that I had just read. Should I continue to read the full email? You are on mute.
Zach, I don't think you need to reread it.
Yeah.
It's the same that you've already read.
It's the one you just read. So
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, just so we are under the same.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay,
do have.
and,
Oh, go ahead.
I will just say those are all the emails that have come in to this point.
I do have one, Mr. Markham, that Lisa mentioned. It wasn't in the list, and I went through your packet, and somehow we missed attaching Steve Fidel's letter. So I'd like to read it. So you guys,
if you would read that, please.
I'm going to read it in the record. So this is from Steve Fidel. It says, "My name is Steve Fidel. I live at 940 West Bryanston Cove, where my wife and I have raised 4 children in the neighborhood adjacent to Viewmont Elementary and Riverview Junior High. All 4 of our children attended both of those schools, and I'm quite familiar with the pedestrian and vehicular traffic patterns in and around the neighborhood and the 2 schools. I have observed passionate conversations for and against the NeighborWorks Salt Lake proposal that is before the Planning Commission. Those conversations often make references to a master plan as well as concerns about traffic safety issues if the existing Willow Grove Lane is connected to the NeighborWorks development. Pedestrian safety is my primary concern. Presuming references to a master plan are talking about the 2017 Murray General Plan, I have read all 172 pages in the PDF of the plan. I have studied many master plan documents as part of my profession, and I'm impressed by the scope of the research conducted to compile this plan. However, I see nothing in the 2017 plan that addresses the parcel of land or the street in question. I believe individuals referring to this plan to make arguments supporting the proposal to connect Willow Grove Lane to Tripp Lane have not read the plan or are misusing the plan to the detriment of the neighborhood. The 2017 plan does set out city objectives that serve as cautions regarding the NeighborWorks proposal. Objective 1 of the transportation system's overall goal is to, quote, provide safe and efficient movement of traffic on city streets while maintaining the integrity of the neighborhoods, close quote. The integrity of the neighborhood would be compromised by connecting Willow Grove Lane to the NeighborWorks project because 6 additional neighborhood streets, 12 residential street intersections, and an additional 69 homes, including the 10 lots proposed by NeighborWorks, would be added to a new junior high traffic pattern. Given both the elementary and junior high schools' locations within the respective school boundaries, a professional traffic study would be needed to estimate whether adding more routes to the school would have any beneficial impact on the streets now carrying the burden of the junior high traffic, 800 West and Tripp Lane. I suspect residents there would see little to no benefit and would experience more through traffic in addition to the school traffic. Pedestrian traffic to and from Viewmont Elementary School, 1 block north of the junior high, would also be negatively impacted if the additional streets become vehicular traffic conduits to the junior high. The current Willow Grove Lane has a pedestrian access through the fence and is exclusively a pedestrian conduit to both schools. Connecting Willow Grove to Tripp Lane would make Willow Grove the collecting point for all vehicular traffic using new routes to the junior high. Working toward greater multimodality is also an objective of the 2017 plan. Quote, working to make a more pedestrian and bike-friendly community can help set Murray apart and work toward regional smart growth initiatives, close quote. And, quote, site design standards for developments should prioritize pedestrian and bicycle access, not just consider automobile access, close quote. The current proposal does not meet that objective. Objective 3 of the transportation system's overall goal is to, quote, support residential traffic calming where proven effective and cost efficient, close quote. Traffic calming is not enhanced by pushing more school traffic through additional neighborhood streets. The best way to calm traffic on the neighborhood streets adjacent to the junior high would be to have a traffic study consider the benefits of moving the entrances to the junior high drop-off lots away from Tripp Lane and around the corner to face 700 West. The best way to calm traffic on the new section of the street proposed for development by NeighborWorks and enhance pedestrian safety would be to end the street in a cul-de-sac. Thank you for your work and consideration. That's that.
Okay.
And I did receive one more.
Okay.
And I had a copy of Steve Fidel's letter in my packet.
Mine doesn't have one, so we must have somehow got some in some and not in
Maybe you
some.
gave me yours.
Maybe. Apologies. Thank you. I'm glad
Oh,
some of
Lisa,
you
it
got-
looks like Lisa had a copy too.
Yeah, I'm glad at least some of you got that. So
Go ahead, Zach.
Okay, Again, this is from Stephanie Pole. I raised several issues in my letter that I sent last Wednesday that have not been addressed. I would like those addressed before a decision is made. Thank you, Stephanie Pole.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public comment portion of this meeting, and I've got a question for Jared. You know, we've had two individuals say that they had specific points brought up in their letters, and they would like those addressed. I guess, can you pull those particular letters and go through those concerns?
Let me start with Ms. Pole's that just got read. So the letter that came in on July 8th. I'm just looking for the question itself. Sorry.
Sure.
I think they might say that Poli.
Pola or
Poli.
Yeah, I believe it is Poli.
One of their questions is about a traffic study.
Yeah, so I would go ahead and say they're not questions per se, they're comments. There's not been a traffic study. So there are two kind of major issues here that they raise in their letter. Well, the first is that there's not been a formal traffic study performed, and that it needs to be undertaken as stated in the Murray engineering specification and requirement document. A traffic study may be required to determine impacts and mitigation of new and modified access points on a roadway system. We did forward that comment to Trey Stokes, who determines when we have to have a traffic study performed, and he did not feel that this met the criteria to require one. Although with that said, I would say that it is an interesting point to consider. I think several people that commented made it too, including Mr. Fidel's letter that we just finished reading. The real issue is not so much volume generated by these lots, because that's minimal. It's the change in traffic pattern and the amount of traffic coming to the area for the schools. And that is significant. And but the project itself, to answer the question and the concern, the project itself does not warrant a traffic study under our rules. So we have not asked for one, although that could be, the Planning Commission can ask for one anytime they feel like it's warranted. If you want to have one done before we go to final, we'll support that, absolutely. But engineering did not ask for one prior to preliminary. So that's to answer that point.
Mr. Hall, can you clarify that for me just a little bit further? Because I feel like you're differentiating between the applicant's responsibility and the city's responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. And you're saying because this applicant's not increasing the traffic, he might not be responsible for the study. Now, if the city wants to do a study at any point, anywhere, we can.
We can. And we can require him to do one if the Planning Commission feels like they should. The NeighborWorks can be required to do a traffic study, although a traffic study of these 10 lots and their impact is going to come back that it should be connected. That's the traffic studies almost always come back with the recommendation that the lots be connected. So lest anyone think that that's going to come back and say, yeah, don't connect these streets, end this in a cul-de-sac. I want to disabuse anyone of the notion that a traffic study is going to dictate a cul-de-sac here. I don't believe that would be the case. A traffic study could be done, and what you really need is a traffic pattern analysis. And if that were done here, it might come back and tell you that there are some benefits, but maybe those benefits are only to a certain level. And I think we kind of expressed that in the link node analysis. There are limited benefits to connecting this road to the larger area. And that's been kind of called out by some of the other folks commenting tonight. The area would, in my opinion, clearly have an improved traffic pattern. The area writ large would have an improved traffic pattern if that road were connected.
And that's somewhat why I asked as well, because you said these 10 lots would show something different than if the city was interested in the traffic pattern in the areas. For example, all the schools and the main arteries, the larger area, not
correct.
10 houses.
Right. These 10 houses are not going to, you're going to get a traffic study back from the traffic engineer that's going to say, yeah, they don't have a significant impact. These 10 lots aren't going to generate enough traffic to create a significant impact that warrants. And a traffic study tells you what you need to do differently. You need to you need to signalize this intersection. You need to widen this lane. You need to add deceleration here, deceleration there. None of that is likely to result from a traffic impact study of these 10 lots. And that's why it wasn't required by the engineering department. I'm putting words in the engineering division's mouth, and I shouldn't do that, but that's my experience with them. If there were more lots, we might have asked for that. A traffic pattern analysis might yield better information, but it's going to tell you similar things. It's going to tell you that this is a limited benefit, but that it's a benefit. So connect the roads. That's my opinion. We could order that to be done. The Planning Commission has the ability under our code to require a traffic analysis or a pattern or whatever you feel like you need to make the proper determination. I think that might be more appropriate once the question of whether eminent domain would be used by the city in the first place was asked. And that's kind of where we are with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And Jared, ask you one more question along those lines. Do school districts conduct traffic pattern studies, or is it up to who's that? I mean, it sounds like the elementary school and the junior high is a concern. Who addresses that? The school district or the city?
School district could if they wanted to as well, and we would certainly want to partner with them in some kind of analysis if they would be interested. I know that it's been brought up as I've talked to people that have called in about the project that, not that have emailed, but that have called in about it. And I've talked to several of the people that emailed on the phone as well. It's been great. Everyone in the neighborhood around has been great to call in and talk things through and really kind of try to understand all of this. The school has property that they could maybe create a different circulation pattern on instead. They haven't done that. I don't know what their hesitation with that would be, and I wouldn't want to try to speak for them. And
it's money, Jared. It's priorities and money. That's the only reason.
Sure, and that makes absolute sense. So, but yeah, that would be something that we could ask for them to participate in. But my guess is they would decline.
Well, we're in a pandemic, and there's property tax cuts and no money for any school districts and our kids. So that's a whole can of worms at the moment.
True. Another point that was made in Ms. Pillai's email was that there is no other residential neighborhood with a small local road in Murray is configured to bear the brunt and weight of traffic for a junior high school and an elementary school. I can't speak to that. I don't dictate where they come, and we have to deal with kind of, in my opinion, we have to deal with the situation that's before us. The pattern, the traffic pattern, and the benefits of connectivity don't only apply to the school. They also have to do with the Jordan River Parkway, access to Willow Grove Pond Park. You have to almost accidentally arrive at Willow Grove Pond, in my opinion, the way things are set up there now. So it doesn't only have to do with the school district and the school traffic. It does. It's severely impacted by that. And that may in fact be the case, and that other schools in the area are set up to handle most of their drop-off and traffic circulation on the larger roads. Some of them do have, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to that was something that I kind of circled in some of these letters when I was going through the comments also, that, specifically Hillcrest Junior High is called out, and Murray High School, that so one of them says, neither Murray High nor Hillcrest vehicle access is designed or encourage surrounding neighborhoods to absorb traffic like this. Either the wrong question or the wrong way to approach that. But I mean, I think Hillcrest Junior High does access the Hillside neighborhood and has roads that directly connect from 56 South through that neighborhood to help with connectivity. Even though it's on 5400 South and that's the main access, it definitely has access into that neighborhood to help with connectivity, help with traffic flow. And same with the high school, if I'm not wrong, they have access to that neighborhood that's directly west of that a lot of cars can leave and enter through that neighborhood, as well as on the two major roads that it sits on the corner of. And so I think actually like this comment is the reverse, in that Riverview Junior High is the only neighbor or the only secondary school in Murray City that has a one-way, no secondary access road to have a major school on. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. What are how do you address that? I guess necessarily that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think you're right, Maren. There's some indirect routes into Hillcrest and to Murray High. You have to work at it a little bit from the side roads, and they have blocked off those some of the major ones at Murray that you used to be able to use. They've Jersey barried those off, but you can still get in and out of the north parking lot and into that other neighborhood down on American Avenue. And that I don't know. In this case, I think you're right on. It's different than that, in that the drop off is away from 7th West. 7th 7th West carries a lot of traffic. I know our engineering division of public works have a lot of concerns about the 7th West traffic and how it flows and functions. And 7th West is going to continue to get busier as development occurs further north and further south. Along 7th West, we have mixed use zones to the north of this area that are going to produce, and office developments that are going to produce traffic on northern sections of 7th West, at least. Maybe once it's crossed 53rd, it's not as heavy, but still, they have a lot of concerns about 7th West, and it doesn't necessarily perform as well as it should. It would be normally where you'd see the drop-off zones for Murray High or Hillcrest in the same kind of situation. But in those situations, you're talking about State Street, 6 lanes of traffic as opposed to 1 in each direction on 7th West in this area. So it's not really apples to apples. I don't think it's a fair comparison, if I'm not to be too short on the comment, but I don't think it's a fair comparison. The situation is what it is. And connecting the road, as I said, doesn't only benefit connectivity because of the school and isn't solely a response to the school traffic. It's a response to people that live in the neighborhoods right there, being able to get in and out of their neighborhood in a more efficient manner than they already do, thereby reducing traffic overall and trips overall. That's what we're always after. I think one of the comments the gentleman that Mr. Fidel made was that pedestrian concerns are the paramount concern, and I agree. To that end, I want to make any vehicular traffic that there is the best that it can be, so that it's reduced in its effect and in its impact, so that things are safer and better for bikes and pedestrians. That's the only way out of the traffic problems that we have in the valley, really. So it might seem a little counterintuitive, but that's what I believe.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that specific comment that he said too. I wrote down the same thing and maybe you can elaborate for me, that he's concerned about the safety of pedestrians and bikes that would be compromised by putting this road through.
Yeah.
Can you speak to maybe how a connect road actually, is it a safer or a more safe option than a dead-ended road that goes to a field? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're talking straight safety, what is the most safe thing?
So there isn't any one sort of supremely safe option, and you can't necessarily, it's not as simple as parsing it out and just saying, well, cul-de-sacs are safer and connected roads are less safe. And it seems maybe easy to say, well, connected roads are less safe because you're going to get more cars at more speeds, but that is not necessarily the case. When you have cul-de-sacs, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. In this pattern up here, where you finally do have through streets, people tend to really use those through streets more heavily than they should because there are no alternative routes. So let's say you have 1,000 cars, no matter what you're doing, your volume exists. You have 1,000 cars. If they have 1 or 2 ways through an area, they use those areas, they use those streets more heavily than they would any others, obviously, right? Well, everyone else that has to walk or ride a bike, also, if they only have those ways to get through, those are the ways they have to use. So you put those 1,000 cars and everybody who wants to get anywhere in a neighborhood that has nothing but cul-de-sacs like this on those few through streets together. That's not safer than areas where there are more connected streets and those 1,000 cars are dispersed among the other streets that can all handle 300 of the cars instead of all 1,000 of them, with the attendant people who also have other options to use too. So you reduce the numbers of pedestrians and bicyclists and cars on each road. So in essence, you're dispersing the risk. So you have to think about it in a global way, not to sound pretentious, but you have to think about it more globally than just, if I live on a cul-de-sac that's only 400 feet long, there's no traffic on my cul-de-sac, therefore it is safer. That is true for your kid on your bike, but for any kid that has to go anywhere else on his bike and has to go out onto 700 West to do it, not safer. I refuse to believe that's a true comment.
That's what I was going to ask. By not having connectivity here, that means that everyone is forced to use the major arterial roads to walk or bike because they don't have a viable sidewalk option through this area.
That's exactly right. Right on.
Okay.
So that's in a nutshell why planning and engineering have supported and why the NeighborWorks engineer also is supporting a connected road, because it does improve pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, and vehicular safety, frankly, in the larger area. Not on Willow Grove Lane, necessarily, but in the larger area by reducing the overall trip generations and vehicle miles traveled. But we may not be able to get that connection but we do support it. And I think it's important for the public to understand and for you guys to understand why we always support that connectivity. And that's exactly why. So I think those are the two major points that she's asking in that question.
And then Doug Barnett's letter.
Right. So let me get to Doug's. Sorry. Go back to here. It'll be easier from this area.
Hey, Jared,
Yeah.
I know one of Mr. Barnett's points in his letter was, why do the lots increase in price if there's a cul-de-sac instead of a through street?
Sure.
And from a development standpoint, sometimes the costs are higher when you have to put in a cul-de-sac street because there's more material required and there are different requirements for a cul-de-sac than a through street. And so that may be contributing to part of the reason why a cul-de-sac would be more expensive than a through street. Just to answer his question on that.
That seems
project redesign as well.
Exactly. It's not just the redesign that costs extra. It's all the additional water pipe that has to be run and all the other things that mitigate, when you have a cul-de-sac, the radius, the amount of fill you have to bring in, all those things add on to the cost of development. So anyway, just throwing that out there for him.
I appreciate that, Sue. Thank you. And then for part of Doug's, are we talking about Mr. Barnett's question? Because he asked a couple. One of his other questions was similar to the one we just talked about high school. It's based on the Murray City 2017 General Plan. Murray High, Hillcrest, Junior, Grant, McMillan, Parkside, all reside on streets that are rated as minor collectors or higher. So we kind of already addressed that.
Yeah, I think we have addressed that, Jared.
Yeah. And then our assessment noted that Tripp Lane and Willow Grove Lane should have connected due to safety concerns related to emergency vehicle access, as I've lived at Willow Grove Lane since it was built. And I'm not aware of any incidents where road access put a life in danger. Do you have any number of incidents the road has caused or any examples of incidents of their severity? I don't. I'm sorry. I don't have any data like that.
I actually do have one. So again, I coached softball there for more than a decade. We had a girl that broke her leg and they couldn't get the fire truck and the ambulance up to the fields because of all of the cars that were there during game time. So they had to walk their gurney across the entire field to be able to get to us because they couldn't physically get their vehicles in there. So they want an example. That's a real world example I saw probably 7 years ago.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have.
Somebody else kind of mentioned that in the comments also, that when softball games are going or things are going, emergency vehicles can't get down Tripp Lane because they're parked on both sides. You can't go 5 miles an hour down that street because people are parked on both sides, even though it's redlined and you're not supposed to be able to park there. People always park there. The police will come through once a season, ticket a bunch of cars. It'll stop it for a minute, but at the end, the cars always end up parked there.
Yeah. That's the reality of living near a school, actually, and school streets are like that all over the place. So I don't really have an answer beyond that for that. Were there other questions of his that I needed to answer? I didn't remember others, I don't think.
I think those were the notes that I made when his letter was being read. And, we have addressed a lot of things in other people's questions as well. And I think those are kind of there's some basic overriding concerns that we have talked a lot about. And I would just like to get other commission members' feelings on the application. I don't think there's a need to call the applicant back up to address any of these at this time, unless some of you feel differently. If you have questions for the applicant, we can certainly do that.
I've got a couple of things, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Ned.
So I'd point out, we're talking about 10 new homes. And I'd like to point out that the Cherry Oak Circle, which is a cul-de-sac just to the east of Willow Creek, also has 10 homes. And so the amount of traffic that the homes are going to generate, the same amount of traffic coming out of Cherry Oaks. It was mentioned earlier about connectivity. The connectivity, yes, it's not going to necessarily increase traffic, but rather redistribute the traffic. It definitely will decrease the volume or the vehicle miles traveled, as Jared proposed earlier. And I'd also, you can look at your map there, Jared, on the screen. Green Oaks to the south, as well as Potomac a little farther south, they both connect. 700 West and the Murray Parkway Boulevard to the west, just along the river. While they connect those two streets, they're not generating through traffic. Those streets are 99% local traffic. You can't get anywhere when you go to the west other than to the Parkway Road. Come into the east, you can get to 700, which then does, as an arterial, does connect to the freeway, to the interchanges and points beyond. But to say that this connection would increase traffic, there will be more traffic just because it is connected. It's all local traffic generated from the schools, and I think will actually improve Tripp Lane as well as Anderson Avenue up on the north side of the junior high, and help distribute that traffic better, which will also improve the overall safety in and around the school areas. So I only see this as a plus for traffic. And boy, I understand about living on Willow Lane. It's quiet there, and it's been great for the last 2 decades. However, as was pointed out earlier, Willow Lane was put in and meant to be a through street when the Murray plan was put together. The fact that it doesn't show a street on the plan, I grant you that. However, again, as you mentioned, Jared, with a dead end street and it just ends, there was intent there by the previous administrations that be a connected street.
Sure.
So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared, I'd like to add that, when Green Oaks was originally developed and those Murray Oak Circle, Noble Oak Circle, Normandy Oak Circle, that road terminated right down there by Normandy Oak Circle. It did not go through. And for a few years, that was just a dead end area there. And I don't think anybody could make a valid argument that it's a bad thing that thing has gone through and is connected. And it wasn't popular when that was connected. However, it's the only sensible thing to do. And to Ned's point about Willow Grove Lane, if you look at that picture and you see a stub road into an open, undeveloped field that can connect with Tripp Lane there, I really don't see how you can say that there was never an intent or that it is a bad thing that goes through. There just isn't a valid argument that's going to hold up other than I don't want any additional traffic on my street. And it's not my street. It's a city street that was built to city standards, and it is a city street.
True. Thank you.
I would just say my only comment is that I'm strongly in favor of connecting this street, and I hope that that is the outcome that comes out of this proposal, because as being on the Planning Commission, I'm looking for what's best for this whole area. And I feel like if we're talking about safety, if we're talking about pedestrians, if we're talking about bikes, if we're talking about number of times cars traveled, if we're talking about people getting to and from these elementary schools, all of the concerns that affect this general area, that this one thing of connecting Tripp Lane to Willow Grove Lane will improve the safety and the connectivity of the whole area. So as a whole, I think that it improves so much. And so, I really think to take into consideration the dangers of 7th West and all of our kids getting to school, to Riverview and to Viewmont from that the connection of these two streets is the best thing for the connectivity of this area, and it increases safety, it increases connectivity. It really kind of works to accomplish a lot of the things that we want as a planning commission for this specific neighborhood. And I think maybe this will be controversial to say, but for me, looking at this map, if I live on Willow Grove Lane and it is now connected from Trip Lane, I can go from 7th West to Trip Lane and get to my house rather than going all the way down and around through that whole neighborhood. You know, to me, it looks like it actually increases the convenience for people that are living on that road as well. Maybe not. I understand that they don't want increased traffic there, but I'm strongly in favor of it being connected. I hope that is the outcome.
You know, I would like to add just one more thing. For me, this is the preferred option that we're discussing right now, the connectivity. However, I'm not an advocate of eminent domain, use of eminent domain. I know there is a purpose for it and there are valid reasons for it. That's not for us to determine. That's a city council issue, and I'm grateful that it's a city council issue. If they decide that they don't want to pursue that, I'm perfectly fine with that as well, because we have an acceptable plan with a cul-de-sac that will still improve this situation, although it won't improve it to the degree that it should and could.
Yeah, I feel too. One of the things, you know, living in proximity, one of the things I see as an advantage of the road going through is how many more students can walk to school safely and not have to be thrust out onto 7th West where there's more traffic. You know, I see the kids coming and going from school, you know, quite frequently, not this spring, of course, but, you know, in years past. I mean, I've lived here for 31 years in this area, and I just think it would be such a benefit to parents and students if they could walk and ride their bikes back and forth through there. You know, opportunities to access that field for play, and I mean, then the Riverview Park is right there. There's just, you know, there's a lot of advantages to having that street go through, and I get it. I understand that cul-de-sacs, you know, are great and all of that. I mean, I live on one, but, you know, I just looking at the greater good, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be helpful to even to all the residents for this to go through. But like Phil said, whatever the city council decides, I'm good either way, because we do have a good alternative option on this street, which we're fortunate to have.
Hey guys, I want to comment too, if I could. I agree with it, most everything everybody said. I'm not a fan of eminent domain, and it makes me feel uncomfortable in this situation, because I do feel like this road should be developed either a through street or a cul-de-sac. I wish we had the option of arguing for a cul-de-sac off of Willow Glen Lane, and I feel like the Livingstons have accidentally shot themselves in the foot, because by having that piece of property and denying a cul-de-sac there, we can't argue that good option. And when we're, as a planning commission, trying to discuss these things, we're looking at the whole community. I always try to consider what we can do to satisfy as many people as possible. And this junior high is used by 50% of the community. So a lot of people have a hand in the pot here and something to say about this. So I see what I wanted to say, when I went through the 21-ish, 20 letters that we received prior to the meeting, I made a chart, and I charted who was in favor, who was opposed, who would rather have a cul-de-sac off of Willow Grove Lane. And to me, honestly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there was even amount of people for the through street as there was opposed to it. So there isn't, from the letters we were written, it wasn't a clear-cut decision. And this road always was to be developed, and it will be developed. And a through street is a good option for the whole community. I see how the residents on the street would be opposed. I wish they had given themselves the option to argue for a cul-de-sac off of their street, but here we are. So, and I'm glad I'm not on the community council to have to make the decision on this one about eminent domain.
Jared,
can I speak to that point?
Oh, yes, please.
So,
please, Travis.
let's remember that this piece of property that we're talking about eminent domain on, if ever there is a reason for eminent domain, this is the reason for eminent domain. This is for the public good. This person is, in fact, not losing usable property that they are doing anything with. It's not like we're coming in and we're taking out their front yard, or we're destroying houses. This is someone that has a small sliver of land that they can do nothing with other than sit on it and be a thorn in the side of the city. If ever there is a reason to use eminent domain, this is the reason to use it. And they will get their just compensation for this piece of property. Not going to be much, because it's not much of a piece of property. So I think, we can be leery of eminent domain, and I am in the big scheme of things, not in this setting. I think if ever there's a time to apply it, this is the reason why you apply it, for the public good. And then the other thing I want to point out is that if you go through section 1616 of city code, where it gets into streets, it is supported over and over and over and over again to integrate the street network as much as possible, especially on existing platted streets. This street is stubbed right to this neighborhood. It's supported in the code, and that code has been voted on time and time and time again by our city council and brought forward by the planning commission. It's supported.
I agree, and well said, Travis. Well said. Any other comments by those by commission members? All right, if not, we can have additional comments, or if someone sees fit to make a motion, I will entertain a motion as well.
I'll make a motion if I can find my note.
If you're going to be too late, Travis, make it.
I got it. Okay, so I make a motion that the Planning Commission grant preliminary subdivision approval for the Trip Lane subdivision on the property address 871 West Trip Lane, subject to conditions 1 through 9.
I'll second.
And Lisa will second it.
Okay. I have a motion by Travis Ney, a second by Lisa Milkevich, that the Planning Commission grant preliminary subdivision approval for the Trip Lane subdivision on the property addressed 871 West Trip Lane, subject to conditions 1 through 9 as presented to us tonight. I want to emphasize this is preliminary subdivision approval. Please call for a vote.
You're on mute, Jared.
That's not embarrassing at all. Mr. Ney.
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hacker.
Yes.
And Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Thank you all.
So Jared, now next steps in this. This will go on to Murray City Council, be agended, and they will discuss this. Approximately how long does that take?
I don't know. Not to be too obtuse, but we will have to ask the applicants to try to get an audience with the city council to request that. That'll be up to them. Getting on the city council's agenda is not something that we as planning staff or community development department controls. We'll direct them how to do it, direct them who to talk to, and they'll have to take it forward and see if they can get an audience with the council to ask them to use an eminent domain and under what circumstances they would or wouldn't. It'll be up to them.
Okay.
Preliminary approval is good for a year. If they're not able to do that and need to redraw, we'll bring it back to you for your consideration as a redraw as a cul-de-sac.
Okay, that was my next question. I wanted to clarify that if this is unsuccessful with the eminent domain and the connection of the road, it will come back as a redesign, and cul-de-sac will be the consideration.
Yes, we would bring it back to you all as a reconsideration with a cul-de-sac instead, if they're not able to get the city council's support for that.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll keep you apprised of progress with it as we go forward in the meetings. We'll let you know if we're hearing any news about it or when they might be going, et cetera, so you can listen in or whatever.
Well, do you have any additional items of business for us tonight? That is the end of our published agenda. So that's the last item.
Yeah. No, we're just, I don't have any updates. We have about 6 items on the next agenda. Mostly conditional uses, so we'll give you a break, process a few little conditional uses. That sounds all right.
All right. Well, all right. Well, I thank you, everybody, tonight. This has been an item that I know we've all really labored over for quite some time and put a lot of thought and consideration and time into it, and I really appreciate it. So I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
We are
everyone.
adjourned. Thank you.
Good night,
Night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.